My wife cheated on me with her boss, then secretly transferred $250, $0 of our savings to his account before I found out. Now she's fighting me in court over our house and the settlement I never knew she was negotiating. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how I found out my wife was cheating on me with her boss and secretly draining our savings to fund some secret life. But here I am, and honestly, it's like my entire world just shattered in 1,000 pieces. The weird part is, I didn't see it coming, not even a little. Things started changing gradually, and I guess I was too blind or too comfortable to notice the signs until it all blew up in my face. It all began a few months ago. Sarah, my wife, always seemed a little more edgy than usual, but I chalked it up to work stress or maybe her just being a bitchy woman. She's always been a bit difficult, quick to lie, quick to get defensive, and she's got this nasty habit of dismissing my concerns with a wave of her hand and a "you're just paranoid." But I knew something was off. She'd start disappearing for hours without telling me where she was going. Her phone was constantly locked, and she was secretive about her emails. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I loved her, and I figured maybe she was just overworked or hiding something trivial. Then, last month, I noticed her phone was left on the kitchen counter, and I couldn't help myself. I looked. Honestly, I wasn't even planning to snoop, but something about the way she was acting made me suspicious. I saw a message thread from her boss, Mark, that was just strange. It was nothing explicit at first, just a lot of flirtatious banter, but what caught me off guard was a message about a special project she was working on and how she was going to need extra hours for it. She told him she'd be working late, maybe even weekends. It seemed innocent enough at first, but I knew her. She's not the type to work late, especially not alone with her boss. Then I found something even more shocking. I was going through our bank statements, just trying to get a grip on things, and I noticed a transfer of $250, $0. That's a quarter of our savings. It was transferred from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize, Mark's account. I stared at that number, my stomach twisting. That kind of money isn't just pocket change. It's our future, our kids' college fund, everything we worked for. And it was gone. I couldn't believe it. I double-checked, refreshed the page, and yep, it was real. Someone had stolen our money. I confronted her that night. I was furious, trembling with rage. I told her about the bank transfer, about what I saw on her phone. Her face turned white, then red, then she started lying right to my face. She said it was a mistake, that I was imagining things, that Mark was just helping her with some business investment she was considering. She claimed she'd never cheat on me, that I was paranoid, that I was overreacting. But I knew better. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way her voice cracked when she lied. That was the moment I knew she was cheating, and she'd been lying about everything. The emotional blow hit me hard. I felt sick, betrayed, humiliated. All those years I trusted her, built my life around her, and this is what I got. A lying, cheating wife who was secretly screwing her boss and draining our savings to fund her affair. I couldn't even process it all at once. Part of me wanted to break down, scream, run away. But I stayed, trying to hold it together. I asked her why. Why did she do this? How could she betray me like that? Her excuses were pathetic. She said she was under pressure at work, that she was unhappy, that Mark made her feel special, important. She called me controlling and paranoid, like I was the problem. But I could see through her lies. I knew she'd been planning this for a while. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs. How I didn't see her slipping away from me. How I didn't notice the way she avoided talking about her work or how secretive she'd become. I felt so stupid for trusting her. I thought I knew her better. But the truth was, she'd been planning her escape for months, and I was just too blind to see it. I sat there, staring at the ceiling, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. I realized then I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not just the affair, but the betrayal of everything we built together. Something had to change. I just didn't know what yet. The next few days were a blur of anger and confusion. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't sleep, and kept replaying everything in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her lying to me, the way her face looked when she was trying to convince me she was innocent. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I was so blind to what she was really up to. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt even more was realizing she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. She'd been sneaking around, transferring our savings, and lying straight to my face. I felt like a complete idiot for not seeing it sooner. I decided I needed to get some answers, so I started digging into her phone and emails more thoroughly. I wasn't proud of it, but I felt like I had no choice. I needed to know exactly how deep this went. What I found was worse than I expected. She'd been in contact with Mark constantly, texts, emails, even secret calls. There were messages where she told him she was done with me, that I was a controlling idiot, and that she was ready to start her new life. She'd even arranged to meet him after work last week, claiming she was working late. I found receipts for hotel rooms booked under her name, paid for with our joint account. She'd been planning this, no doubt about it. I also uncovered something that made my blood boil. She transferred a huge chunk of our savings, $250, to Mark's account. That's not just cheating, that's theft. I couldn't believe she'd do something so calculated. It was clear she'd been trying to cover her tracks, but I was too late. The money was gone, and I had no idea how she'd managed to transfer it without me noticing sooner. It looked like she'd been funneling money out over months, probably hiding it in different accounts or offshore. I felt sick just thinking about it. When I confronted her again, she was furious. She told me I was paranoid, that I was making everything up, that Mark was just a friend and her boss, and that I was overreacting. She said the money transfer was a mistake, that she'd never steal from me, that she was just trying to save our marriage. But I didn't believe her. How could I? She was lying so easily, so convincingly. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but she was good at hiding it behind a fake smile and tears. She kept insisting she loved me, that she'd never cheat, that I was just insecure. It was all bullshit. I knew she'd been lying from the start. What hit me hardest was realizing how much I'd trusted her, how I'd believed in us. We'd been married for 10 years, had 2 kids, a house, a life planned out. And she'd been betraying me behind my back the entire time. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut every time I thought about it. The betrayal wasn't just about the money or the affair. It was about the lies, the deception, the way she'd manipulated everything. I felt so angry, so hurt, so betrayed. I kept asking myself how I was going to pick up the pieces of my life after this. I started talking to a lawyer because I knew I had to protect myself and figure out my next move. I was already thinking about divorce, but I also wanted to understand what I was entitled to, especially with that stolen money and the house. The lawyer told me that I had a strong case for financial betrayal and possibly even criminal theft if I could trace where the money went. But what shook me was the realization that she might try to fight me over the house, claiming she had some rights because she'd been there longer or some bullshit like that. I didn't trust her anymore, and I knew she'd lie to the bitter end. Honestly, I felt lost. I'd always believed that marriage was a partnership, built on trust and respect. And now I was faced with the fact that she'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. The woman I thought I knew was a complete stranger. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far, how I'd been so blind. But there was no point dwelling on what I should have seen. I had to focus on what was next. I knew I had to rebuild, to protect what I still had left, and to make sure she didn't get away with destroying everything we built. The pain was overwhelming, but I also knew I couldn't let her win. Not without a fight. After I gathered enough evidence and talked to my lawyer, I realized I had to act fast. The house was the biggest asset we had, and I knew she was already trying to spin her narrative, claiming she had some kind of emotional attachment to it or that I was trying to kick her out unfairly. That was her usual tactic: manipulate, lie, and turn things around to make herself look like the victim. But I wasn't going to let her do that. I knew what she was capable of, and I had to be prepared for a fight. I decided to get a private investigator. I wanted proof that she was still seeing Mark, maybe even meeting with him secretly. I wasn't going to trust her word anymore. I hired someone discreetly, and within days, he came back with more than I bargained for. Turns out, she'd been sneaking around behind my back even after I confronted her the second time. There were pictures of her going into a hotel with Mark late at night, her car parked in a secluded lot. She lied about working late, lied about everything. It was clear she'd been lying from the beginning, and this wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown betrayal with financial theft thrown in. My emotions were all over the place. I felt rage, betrayal, heartbreak, but also a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to protect myself and my kids. I couldn't let her manipulate her way into keeping the house or any other assets. I filed for an emergency court order to freeze our assets, including the house, and demanded full disclosure of her finances. I also started preparing for the inevitable court battle, knowing she'd do everything to spin her story and twist the facts. Meanwhile, she was still playing the victim. She'd call me a controlling asshole, say I was trying to ruin her life, and accuse me of harassment because I was pushing for transparency. She claimed I was paranoid, that I was trying to punish her for her affair. It was infuriating. She sat there, bitching and crying, acting like she was the one wronged. But I knew better. I'd seen the messages, the transfers, the hotel receipts. She was lying, and she was desperate. One day, she even tried to turn the kids against me, said I was trying to take everything away from her, that I was abusive because I was demanding answers. That was the last straw. I realized she was willing to do anything to keep her secrets hidden, even if it meant destroying everything else. I told her I'd fight her in court, that I'd expose her for what she really was, a liar, a thief, and a cheat. I wasn't going to let her win, not after all she'd done. The day of the court hearing came fast. I was nervous, but also determined. I had my evidence, my lawyer, and my resolve. She showed up with her lawyer, looking confident but also a little panicked. She kept insisting she was innocent, that the money transfer was a mistake, that she loved me and wanted to fix things. But I didn't buy any of it. I laid out everything, the texts, the hotel receipts, the bank transfer records, the photos. It was overwhelming for her, I could tell. She tried to deny everything, but the judge saw right through her lies. The judge ordered a forensic audit of our bank accounts and the transfer records. She was furious, of course. She argued that she deserved to keep the house because she'd been living there longer, that her affair was just emotional, not financial. I knew she was trying to manipulate the situation, but I also knew I had the law on my side. I demanded full custody of the kids, the return of the stolen money, and a fair division of assets based on what was legally ours. The judge was firm, and I could see that he was taking my side. After the hearing, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Things weren't over yet, but I had taken a major step forward. I knew she'd try to fight me in every way possible, but I also knew I had the truth on my side. That night, I sat alone in the house, feeling hollow but also strangely empowered. I'd lost a wife, yes, but I'd gained clarity. I realized I had to focus on moving forward, on protecting my kids, and on rebuilding my life from the ruins she left behind. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to be strong, because if I didn't fight for myself now, no one would. The days following the court hearing felt like a whirlwind. I was finally starting to see some daylight, but I knew better than to think this was over. She was furious, and I could tell she was already plotting her next move. I kept my guard up, making sure every document was in order, every piece of evidence backed up, because I knew she'd try to spin things again, probably accuse me of harassment, or claim I was trying to ruin her reputation. She was good at twisting the truth, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the fallout at home. The kids sensed the tension, even if they didn't understand all the details. My oldest, Emma, kept asking why Mommy wasn't coming home, and I had to find a way to explain things without scaring her. I told her Mommy was just having some time to think, but I knew the truth was more complicated. I was trying to shield them from the worst of it, but I couldn't hide everything. Every night I'd sit in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of betrayal crushing me. One thing I didn't expect was how much her lies would escalate. She started calling friends, family, anyone who would listen, painting herself as the victim. She claimed I was abusive and trying to control her, which was laughable. I'd never raised my voice at her, never hit her, never did anything remotely abusive. Yet she spun stories so that she looked innocent and I was the villain. She even hired her own lawyer to fight the custody and property battles, trying to sway things in her favor. Then, out of nowhere, I received an anonymous tip. Someone had sent me a message, an email detailing her ongoing contact with Mark. It included screenshots of new messages, plans to meet again, and even more transfers of money she'd hidden. The worst part, she'd been funneling even more cash, another $150, $0, into an offshore account under a fake name. I was stunned. How much more damage was she capable of doing? How far was she willing to go? I handed all this new evidence over to my lawyer. We pushed to expedite the forensic audit, knowing that the more we uncovered, the better position we'd be in for the upcoming court battles. I also started gathering witness statements from friends and colleagues who had seen her acting strangely or overheard her talking about getting away with everything. I wanted to build a case, a solid one, to ensure she wouldn't manipulate her way out of her crimes. Throughout this chaos, I felt a strange mixture of anger and sadness. I was angry because she had betrayed everything we built, every trust, every hope. Sad because I loved her once, and now I was tearing apart my own life trying to salvage what I could. I kept asking myself how someone I trusted so deeply could turn into this lying, manipulative person. The betrayal was so deep, so personal, I wondered if I'd ever recover from it. Honestly, some nights I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling numb. I knew I had to stay strong for my kids, for myself. But some days, the pain was almost too much to bear. In the middle of all this, she tried to reach out. First, it was a few passive-aggressive texts, then phone calls where she begged me to talk, to work things out, to not destroy her life. I ignored most of them, knowing better than to fall for her manipulations again, but her words still haunted me. She insisted she was innocent, that the affair was just a moment of weakness, that I was overreacting, that her love for me was real. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but I couldn't forget what I'd seen, what I'd uncovered. I was also starting to realize that the house, the biggest asset we had, was going to be a battleground. She claimed she had rights because she'd been living there longer, even though I was the one who paid the mortgage, paid for the renovations, and kept everything running. I knew I had to fight hard to keep it. It was more than just a house. It was a symbol of everything I'd worked for, and I wasn't about to lose it because she was a lying cheat. My lawyer advised me to prepare for a long legal fight, and I was ready. I wasn't going to let her take what was mine without a fight. Every day, I'd wake up with a new sense of dread, but also a renewed determination. I had to keep going, keep fighting, because giving up wasn't an option. I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible, but I still had my kids, my integrity, and the truth on my side. I knew she'd try more dirty tricks, but I was ready for it. I'd learned the hard way that trust was a fragile thing, and once broken, it's almost impossible to repair. But I was going to do everything I could to protect what little I had left, and maybe, someday, rebuild my life from this chaos. The legal battles dragged on longer than I expected, and every day felt like a new test of patience and resilience. My lawyer kept pushing for a quick resolution, but she was fighting just as hard, if not harder, to hold on to the house and the money she'd stolen. The more evidence we uncovered, more hidden accounts, offshore transfers, secret meetings, the clearer it became that she'd planned all of this well in advance. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, and I couldn't do anything but brace myself for what was coming next. One of the most brutal moments came during a deposition she gave. She sat there, tears in her eyes, claiming she was the victim of a controlling husband who didn't understand her needs, and that Mark was just a good boss who cared. She insisted she never transferred any money, never met Mark outside of work, and that everything I found was a misunderstanding. She spun her lies so convincingly that even her own lawyer looked unsure. I wanted to scream, to call her out on her bullshit, but I kept my composure. I knew her tactics. She was trying to manipulate the situation to turn the court against me. Meanwhile, I was gathering more evidence, talking to people who knew her secrets. I found old bank statements showing repeated small deposits into offshore accounts, money she'd hidden away for months. I hired a private investigator to follow her, and he confirmed she'd been secretly meeting Mark at a fancy hotel downtown more than once. The hotel receipts were paid with cash, and she'd used fake names. She was trying to cover her tracks, but every new piece of evidence just made her look worse. The biggest blow came when the forensic audit finally finished. They found that not only had she transferred the $250, but she'd also siphoned off nearly $500,000 in total, moving it into various accounts and investments we didn't even know about. She'd been planning her escape for a long time. I felt sick. This wasn't just infidelity, it was outright theft, and she'd been lying to me the entire time. I realized she'd been manipulating the entire situation to her advantage, trying to make me look like the bad guy while she got away with everything. I also learned she'd been telling her friends that I was abusive, that I'd lost my mind, and that she was just trying to protect her future. It made me angry, how easily she lied, how she twisted the truth. I knew she was trying to turn everyone against me, but I also knew that the evidence was stacking up against her. I refused to be the victim of her lies anymore. I had the facts, and I was going to use them. The court hearings became more intense. She kept pushing to keep the house, claiming she deserved it because she'd been there longer, even though I paid the mortgage and took care of everything. She argued that her affair with Mark was just a mistake, that she loved me, and that I was trying to ruin her life. I knew she was desperately trying to cling to her version of reality, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I laid out all the evidence, texts, bank records, hotel receipts, witness statements, and showed the judge exactly what she'd done. One thing that really stuck with me was how she tried to manipulate the court. She claimed I was controlling, that I'd abused her emotionally, and that I was trying to ruin her reputation. The judge, however, was sharp. He saw through her lies and ordered a full forensic examination of her financials. He also granted me temporary custody of the kids, which was a relief, but I knew this wasn't the end. She'd fight to the bitter end, and I had to stay prepared. Honestly, I felt drained but also more determined than ever. I'd lost my wife, my trust, and a lot of our savings, but I still had my kids and the truth. I realized that this wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about protecting myself from someone who had betrayed everything I believed in. I had to rebuild my life, no matter how broken I felt. The pain was almost unbearable, but I knew I couldn't let her win. I had to stay strong, keep fighting, and make sure justice was served. Because at the end of the day, the only thing I could truly control was my own integrity, and I wasn't about to let her take that from me. The final stretch of this nightmare has been the hardest. After everything, the lies, the theft, the betrayal, I thought I'd be broken. But somehow I've managed to find a sliver of strength I didn't know I had. The court finally ruled in my favor, ordering her to return the stolen money, and I got full custody of the kids. The house was awarded to me after a long, grueling fight, and she's now fighting to appeal the decision. Honestly, I don't care anymore. I've learned so much from this mess, about trust, about betrayal, about what really matters. Looking back, I realize that the biggest lesson I've taken away is how fragile relationships can be when lies and greed take over. I trusted Sarah completely, and she threw that all away for Mark, for money, for some illusion of happiness she thought she'd find outside. I used to think marriage was about loyalty and honesty, but now I see it's also about being vigilant, about knowing when to stand up and fight for yourself. I won't lie. Some days I still wake up feeling empty, angry, or just numb. But I also wake up with a clearer sense of who I am, someone who's been through hell but refused to give up. I've started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I've cut all contact with her, blocked her from my phone, and made sure she can't manipulate or deceive me anymore. I've also started therapy, trying to process everything I've gone through, because honestly, losing my wife, my trust, and a huge chunk of our savings has shaken me to my core. But I've learned that healing isn't linear, and sometimes you just have to take it one day at a time. The biggest thing I want anyone reading this to understand is that no matter how betrayed you feel, no matter how much it hurts, you have the power to stand up and fight for what's right. I thought I was going to lose everything, my marriage, my stability, my dignity. But I didn't. I fought for my future, for my kids, and for myself. And in the end, that's what mattered most. So if you're ever in a situation where you suspect betrayal, whether it's infidelity, financial deception, or anything else, don't ignore the signs. Dig deep, gather evidence, and fight for your truth. Because at the end of the day, the only way to reclaim your life is to confront the darkness head-on. It's not easy and it's not quick, but I promise you the pain does get better with time. Trust me, I've been there and I survived.